Discussion on business opportunities for green growth. I would like to welcome our moderator and panelists to the days. Our moderator for the session, Mr. Sachin Jain, CEO India and Southeast Asia Cleantech Renewable Assets. Our panel members, Ms. Anjali Bansal, founder Avaana Capital. She will be joining us virtually due to unforeseen circumstances. We have Mr. Amit Kumar Sinha, MD and CEO, Mahindra Lifespace Developers. We have here Mr. Vineet Rai, founder, Aavishkaar Group. We have Mr. Deepesh Nanda, President, Renewable, Tata Power and MD and CEO at Tata Power Renewable Energy Limited.
Anjali, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I can't be there in person, but great to be together.
Thanks, Anjali. Shall we get started? Okay. Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon. First of all, thank you, Bombay Chambers, for giving me a chance to moderate this session, and welcome all the panel members, and also welcome Anjali to virtual session. So after a very powerful session by Sir, and I'm really intrigued by a lot of things which you have shared. And today's topic is very pertinent to what we have been discussing. It's about business opportunities for green growth, and the topic is so crucial. I mean, particularly from a planet point of view, it's at the right time where we are seeing various changes in terms of the climate crisis which we are seeing. At the same time, there is a good amount of green opportunities which we have in front of us. So we have a fantastic group of experts with us, and I have looking forward for a very insightful discussions. And so what I will do is just give a brief context first, and then we will follow, with a deep dive in some of the topics, and follow up with the Q&A sessions. To start with, let me give a broader context. And if you see in terms of the climate targets, we have largely missed those targets globally. And if you look at in terms of measurements, particularly in terms of carbon emissions or carbon concentration globally, we are not decreasing, rather we are increasing. We are at right now 419.3 parts per million. So this is the real fact which we are facing right now. And due to this, we are seeing various extreme climate conditions. Sir has explained a lot of that, but if you see hurricanes, floods, and in terms of wildfires, we are seeing across various countries, right? And so this is impacting various millions of people, and at the same time, it's a very concerning lot of us. So with this, there is a need for sustainable solutions, and we are seeing that there is a growing momentum towards green growth and net zero goals. And particularly this shift is happening towards green energy, green fuels, about electric vehicles, sustainable supply chains, and also emergence of climate finance. So with this transformation, I feel that India is very well positioned. And if you see that India's GDP, in terms of very few places in the world, we have about 6.5 to 7% kind of a GDP growth. And in terms of the economy, we are close to now about 4 trillion of economy now, and expected, it's estimated about, we will grow to about 8 to 9 trillion by 2032. And this is the amount of scale we are looking at it. And with this scale, this presents a significant amount of opportunities for us for a green growth. And just to highlight some of this scale which is happening is, if you look at in terms of the digital infrastructure which is growing, we have about 850 million internet users right now. And in terms of the UPI transactions, we have crossed about 9 billion transactions every month. So there is a growing use of digital tools, and the data centers are continuously, we are seeing globally is increasing. To just give a number, we are looking at about 17 to 20 gigawatt of data center size in India by 2030. So that's a very big number. In terms of EV, if you just look at the first 10 months, we are about 9.5 lakh sales of two-wheelers in India. So that's another very big growth what we are seeing. In terms of energy transition and green hydrogen has a strong potential. And if you look at by 2047, we are at about a potential of about 25 million metric tons. So that's another big number. In terms of renewables, we already have crossed about 200 gigawatt of renewables, and the target is to have a non-fossil fuel by 500 gigawatt by 2030. And by 2047, the estimate growth is in renewables is expected to grow from the current 200 gigawatt to about 1800 gigawatt to 2000 gigawatt by 2047. So if you can see, that's a very significant amount of growth in front of us. So this is what we see as we tread our journey towards a Viksit Bharat. So it's not just about economic growth, but at the same time, we need environment sustainability. And this is where the topic of today is relevant. It's about green growth. And I will ask my fellow panelists to share their thoughts and ideas in terms of what opportunities they are seeing for a green growth, and in terms of what challenges they see, and how do we tackle that. So let me start off the panel, and let me ask Anjali with you first. Anjali, you have been at the forefront of investing in the climate space, and particularly, how do you see a role of technology and innovation playing in green growth for India?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Sachin, thank you for a wonderful introduction to the session today. I'm very happy to see the Sustainability Conclave continue. We, at Bombay Chamber, we initiated the first one during my term as president. So I'm glad to see that this has become a regular feature on our annual calendar, and very strong participation and engagement across the membership. So I'm going to speak about technology to start with and why it is important. I think for the most part, over the last 10, 15 years, the narrative around green or sustainability has tended to focus on energy alone. And Deepesh will talk about energy, of course. And needless to say, it is a large emitter, and our emission footprint is largely energy. But in India, it's also agriculture. Across the world, it's also supply chain. There is a reason to focus on innovation and technology, because we need new solutions. These are old problems. Old solutions will not lead to new outcomes. So we need a lot of innovation to come through in materials. For example, if you're thinking about circular economy, plastics, and the use of plastics and the substitution of plastics in the supply chain. New battery chemistries, new ways of growing food. So agriculture continues to be a large emitter as well as a user of water, and lots of embedded energy in water as well. So consequently, need to focus on innovation and technology, number one. Number two, India, as you mentioned, is now at the forefront of digitization and also actually technology and frugal technology innovation. So a lot of these, the R&D and the work that happens in Western countries, say the US, Northern Europe, and so on, while those solutions may exist, they're often not affordable and accessible across the Indian value chain to Indian farmers, Indian MSMEs to make the green transition happen. As we move forward over the next 25 years, get to the 6 to 9% GDP growth, we have to be conscious that we are actually not talking about decarbonization, but a fundamentally lower carbon growth pathway for India. There isn't much to decarbonize. Our emission footprint, even today, is relatively much, much lower than developed countries. So instead of only focusing on reducing the footprint, we also have to think about fundamentally new ways of building in our built environment, in manufacturing, our energy consumption, growing food, water usage, and so on, and hence the need for technology innovation. Number three, we have one of the lowest spends on R&D, GDP. 0.7% of GDP is R&D spend. And as our GDP grows and R&D does not grow, that will actually continue to go lower versus higher. And hence the need to create better infrastructure to promote investment and innovation and technology, which is indigenous, which is frugal, which is accessible to India and the global south, and to create the financing flows for this. So I'll pause there.
Thanks, Anjali. I will move to Amit. Amit, how do you see, from a industry point of view, and you have been a leader in giving energy efficient and green buildings. So how do you see in terms of what are the challenges or in terms of how easy or difficult it was to set the net zero goals and in terms of, adoption for a green growth?
Thank you, Sachin, for having me. My first time at Bombay Chamber, so glad to be here. At Mahindra, sustainability is a big priority, and I'm glad to see my old friend Anirban, who used to head sustainability at Mahindra. He is part of Mahindra University now. But we work very closely to define the sustainability for the Mahindra group, and not to be a sustainability leader in India, but how can we be a sustainability leader globally. And it was very important for us to do that because of the point General Chadha you made, because there's a lot of greenwashing that happens. There's a lot of talk rather than implementation, and execution always suffers. So when I left strategy sustainability, I joined the real estate business. It was quite important for us to redefine how buildings, how we look at the real estate sector from a sustainability point of view. Mahindra Lifespace looks up to some of the majors in the real estate. We call them DLGOP, DLF, Lodha, Godrej, Oberoi, Prestige. They have done really well in terms of scaling their presence globally. So we had to carve out our own niche. And we found that given Mahindra legacy, what we have done there, it's sustainability, green building, net zero could be a very nice way for us to differentiate ourselves and also demonstrate that we care for the planet, that we care for the all the things that we just talked about in the previous session, and we're going to be talking through the day. Over the years, we've been doing green buildings, which are well certified. It has all the right amenities. But net zero is a different level altogether. Net zero has three parts: net zero energy, net zero waste, which means that you're not sending any waste to the landfill, and net zero water. It gets increasingly more difficult. Net zero for a residential high-rise is very uncommon, and we are glad to be the only real estate developer that has 3 under construction net zero buildings, net zero energy buildings. 2 of them are also net zero waste. Let me just give you one explanation, and then I'll touch your second part of the question quickly. Net zero energy, it seems easy, but as General Chadha, you explained how you have to look at the design of the building, how the wind patterns are, how the solar patterns are, how the seasonality is. For a high-rise, it matters a lot. If you see, we are sitting in a room which has no windows, and we are using a lot of light, a lot of air conditioning. We are talking about generating a lot of carbon emissions within this room itself. So how do you fix that is to use light that can come inside the room. But when you allow windows, it also allows heat to come in. Therefore you have to have air conditioning. So you have to find the right balance. You have to use special glass that allows light but doesn't allow heat to come in. And many of these things are required for you to design the right set of buildings. So we did that as part of the design, but that doesn't solve the problem. So if you're using 100 units of electricity, all the design and everything that you do can reduce it from 100 to 65, 1/3 reduction. But you still have 65 units of electricity that needs to be managed. You can put solar rooftop, you can put even windmill. In one of the first project, we're putting windmills on top of our buildings, high-rise buildings. So you have to be very careful how we design the strength of the building. That can improve by 10%. So 65 can come down to 60, maybe 57. So we worked with Bangalore's Karnataka government to really convince them that as a low tension customer, Deepesh, you'll know, we should be allowed to secure green supply of electrons, like green electricity, which was not common. It took us a long time. So all the electrons that we procure now, for our residential building is green electrons. So we pay a premium for that, although solar is cheaper because of the way it comes through all the charges that are there, banking, and it's not round the clock. So we pay more, but even if you're paying 10% more on the 55 units, it's still 60. So from 100, you're paying 60 units equivalent, right? Which is a significant saving, and it's all green. But we had to work through that challenge quite a lot. And then we are sharing that through our platform with King Charles Sustainable Market Initiative. We have a partnership with Johnson Controls. We are sharing that it's a non-commercial part. Any developer who wants to learn how net zero can be done on the energy side, we are able to provide, because it's the right thing for the industry, right thing for the planet. And similarly waste, similarly water, there are many things that we can talk about. The water is the toughest because the residential projects require a lot of water on a daily basis. In India, the average per capita consumption of water is 40 liters. In high rises goes to 1,000 liters per day. And the flushes and the showers are the culprits in that way. So we have to look at all those things very carefully. You just can't replenish water through rainwater harvesting and recycling and nothing. You have to have offset, you need to have reservoir, and there's a lot to be done there. And we are trying to solve that on the water side. Waste part is obviously, some part is solved. We are reducing our landfill contribution significantly. And I'm glad to note your point, General Saab, that you have done amazing. We have to learn a lot from you, so hopefully we'll get there soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Amit. And very interesting points, and definitely water is a very difficult topic, and what we are seeing is also like the OPEX model we have seen in the energy space, and some companies are now evolving and providing OPEX model in the water space as well. So it will be very interesting to see how that develops. I'll come to Vineet. Vineet, you have been deeply involved in various social startups and in the impact space for so many years. And now you're also involved in climate and ESG investing. So as such, as a green growth theme, where do you see, in terms of the value pools or investments, where there could be an opportunity where entrepreneurs are focusing on, or where they can focus on?
Okay, so let me thank Bombay Chambers of Commerce, but I wanted to compliment Lieutenant General Chadha for a very humor-laced but very thought-provoking presentation. A lot of what you talked about is what probably I'll try to paraphrase from an investor's point of view. Let me start by the circularity part. You ended by showing the person who embodies circularity, especially the waste picker. So around 12 years back, we were driving past one of the largest landfills in Bombay. And I had just hired a partner from Citibank, and he was saying, so explain to me what is impact investing. So I said, look outside and see a problem. He looked outside. We saw a huge landfill which was jutting out like a Mount Everest. It was not inside, it was above the ground. And he actually said, oh, I see a lot of waste. I said, can you find an entrepreneur who sees a lot of gold there instead of waste? And if you can find that entrepreneur, and we put in and I said impact investing is if you can find a person who sees gold there but doesn't try to make that gold from the government. So government cannot be a buyer of that, this thing. So 12 years later, we have built a company called Nepra right from the scratch, which essentially, I think you would have visited them in Indore. So it started with a 2 crore investment, what 2 guys sitting in Ahmedabad working with rag pickers. Today, they are India's largest waste recycling company with around 600 metric ton of waste recycling. Three combinations. One, high risk taking. It is not very intelligent to give 3 crores to 2 guys who have never seen 30 lakhs and then have a fire that burns that 3 crores into 3 kg of ash and put 20 more crores after that. So requires huge risk taking. You have to have the courage to find those who can look at opportunity in the waste and then integrate the waste recyclers into the business. I just forgot one point I wanted to mention. I tried to get into Army 5 times. 5 SSBs failed all the 5. So I just wanted to compliment you that not only did you clear the SSB, but you were here challenging our own notions of investing. So, Anjali mentioned about agriculture. I was probably the first investor in agriculture in India. And I mean, what are we doing today? We are actually producing largest amount of grain, the grain that we cannot consume, pulling out all the water from the aquifers. And so I'll take you back to 2010. India did not export a single pomegranate. It used to produce pomegranate, never exported a single pomegranate. An IIT Kanpur guy wanted to quit McKinsey to start a company to export pomegranates. And I gave him 5 crores. Long story short, today India exports 1,000 crore worth of pomegranates, also exports bananas, and these bananas now go to Europe and US. You'll be surprised that Dubai never put Indian banana on the shelf. You would have never found Indian banana on the shelf in Dubai, in Lulu Mall, as late as 6 months back. So there is something that you need to do. Indians go by taste. The world goes by actually the look and feel of the... So you need to essentially help your farmers move away from grain, but in a profitable manner and a sustainable manner. And that's what we are trying to do. Of course, when you look at climate purely as an investor, then of course we look at it in 2 parts. One is the biosequestration side, which essentially is pretty much growing trees so that you can fix carbon, so that we can get into a voluntary trade. One of the biggest wishes I had as a forester, I'm a trained forester, how do you actually combine forestry with poverty? You can go to the remotest part of India, help people grow trees, and then while let the timber, tree, wood and fuel all stay with the farmer, but trade and return the capital back, get global investors to invest and return the capital back by trading the voluntary carbon. Now, of course, with Mr. Trump's coming back, voluntary carbon is in a little bit of jeopardy, but I think it will settle over a 3 or 4 years period, given that Elon Musk's fortunes are very deeply connected with voluntary carbon. So we are hopeful there is a semblance of this. But in India, we just launched our carbon credit trading mechanisms, and while compliance carbon will be probably the major part of it, and you mentioned about steel, what is green steel being prescribed, so will actually be on cement, etc. That compliance trade would probably play a fairly large role, and we hope to play it, but I want to actually play a fairly significant role on the voluntary side, especially on natural resource-based carbon sequestration. I think Anjali and us, both of us, will be investing a significant amount of our capital in trying to solve the problems that will emanate when all these batteries start going back into the waste recycle. A fairly significant challenge is already emanating because these batteries, unlike plastic, will kill you faster than the plastic will. So we need to find better ways of managing them. I'll just stop here. There is a huge opportunity of actually identifying entrepreneurial initiatives that will probably help India progress. The word sustainability is actually a very challenging word because you can grow green, but will you be sustainable requires massive amount of investment in technology, including, let's say, we heard about green hydrogen. In my view, the way green hydrogen electrolyzer is produced today gives a monopoly to 2 companies who provide the membrane. We have just invested in a company that actually produces 2 Indian boys who have come up with the technology to do away with the membrane and to segregate hydrogen and oxygen. That's the only way to scale, because otherwise it will just too expensive to produce green hydrogen. You will never win against the grey hydrogen. So I'll just stop here.
Thanks, Vineet. That's very interesting. And to the topic which you touched upon, and also Lieutenant General Chadha sir also touched upon, is like various items like steel, aluminium, and how we really treat them. And in Europe, if you see, there's already CBAM is there, this carbon border adjustment mechanism, and is right now voluntary. By 27. It's getting more formal, and a lot of companies are working towards, and we saw a lot of emerging tenders coming towards that where every 30 minutes you have to give 50% renewable power, and so there's a lot of requirement which is coming, and I hope what you mentioned, a lot of the sectors as well start going towards green and meet their scope 1, scope 2, and even scope 3 kind of ambitions. With this, Deepesh, I mean, you have been at the heart of this from an energy side and across the entire value chain. What growth opportunities do you see to accelerate this green ambitions?
Thank you, Sachin, and I would like to thank Bombay Chambers for inviting me here. I'd also like to compliment General Saab, for an eloquent presentation. You've covered it all better than any industry expert could have done it. At Tata Power, our focus is on renewable energy. And I'll just give you the lay of the land as to how we're going about adding capacity in India. So first things first, we are adding massive capacity to the grid. So these are large grid scale plants. We have a total capacity of close to 11 gigawatt now, out of which 6 is operational. We are constructing 5. On a daily basis, our emphasis is to add at least 15 megawatts to the grid. And that's the pace at which the company is adding capacity. Now to do this, what we've done is that we've built a large-scale manufacturing facility for solar cells and modules, just got commissioned. We have in all a 5 gigawatt capacity, and that's an important point because it also helps India to have its own technology in terms of manufacturing. And at some point in time, we need to start thinking in terms of, say, the silk route that we want to develop and just go right down to the materials that we will need to go completely green. Otherwise, that could become a bottleneck for us. The other area that we closely track and focus is on how to help industry grow green. If you take steel, for example, or you mentioned about the group captive policies that we put to use for the housing sector. You also mentioned about data centers. I think the demand is real for data centers, and within that, our ability to replace the fossil electron on a 1:1 basis, I think that is an area of focus for most large industry players. The Indian government has done exceedingly well. Again, was explained very well by General Saab. Now, the Indian government's tenders which are now coming out are not just for a pure play solar or a pure play wind. It's a combination of different solutions as long as you follow the load curve. And that's an area that we are focusing on pretty cogently to make sure that we replace the fossil electron. The next segment is super exciting for us and was also again mentioned by you in your presentation, which is the rooftop solar. And I'd like to talk about how the scheme is actually playing out. So the PM Surya Ghar rooftop solar program is, I think, one of its kind anywhere in the world, I suppose. And I'm almost tempted to ask this audience to raise your hands if you have a rooftop solar in your homes. Of course, many of you would live in high-rise buildings and say that, look, I don't have a roof. But then the job that we have, or the duty that we have, the obligation that we have, is to spread the word on how the scheme works. So number one, for a household of 4 or 5 people, the load that we need per household is 5 kilowatt. Now that 5 kilowatt load, today you would be paying an electricity bill of close to 4,000 to 6,000 rupees. And I'll pause here and I'll just share an anecdote as to why there is a need for us to share awareness. The other day, my wife and I were invited for dinner, so we enter into this beautiful campus. And these are independent houses in an upscale campus. And after the dinner, when the couple came out to see us, I noticed that in the adjacent house, there was a rooftop solar installed. So then I just asked them that, do you also have a rooftop solar? Because at that point in time, from that point, I couldn't see whether that roof had a rooftop solar. So the wife mentioned that, hey, that one is frightfully expensive. Now I kept quiet. I said that, how expensive could it be? So a number was thrown at me that it cost 25 lakhs. Now I didn't want to embarrass them because this is the first time that they had invited us, but I thought that I'll come back later and send them a WhatsApp message as to what should it really cost. Now I'll tell you how much it costs for a 5 kilowatt household, which is your middle class, upper middle class capacity that you consume. It costs you 2 lakh rupees to buy a system without the government subsidy. The Indian government pitches in with a 78,000 rupee rebate. And the way the discount works is that you make an application online, there is a portal available. The moment you hit the enter button, the algorithm runs and you get a printout which says that this amount has been sanctioned against Aadhaar number this to your bank account this. The moment you complete the installation, you go back to the software, you enter a certificate of installation with a Tata Power would give you, and the money is in your bank. Your bill comes down from 5,000 rupees to 400 rupees. The payback is less than 10 months. So what we've done is that we've taken it upon ourselves to at least add 30 lakh rooftop solar in 3 large states in India. One is in UP, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu. We already, I mean, not the forum for me to mention, but we already are the largest player in terms of adding rooftop capacity in India. But that's one area where India can accelerate going green. And the last is EV charging. I heard a lot about EV charging. Again, you know, we play a role in that ecosystem by being the largest EV charger provider in the country. We have more than 120,000 EV chargers in the country. But let's have the confidence that as India increases its grid scale capacity of renewable energy, what you mentioned 200 today, I think we'll be in the range of 400 to 450 by 2030. The ecosystem will change and you will soon have EV charging become completely green. We're also working on concepts that how do we come up in those locations where you can have rooftop solar and charge the EV charge and make it completely green. Lastly, an important point that has happened in the sector for it to grow at its own momentum is the cost of electricity and the returns that an investor would make. So today, if you're an investor in the green energy business, especially to address that 26% question that you had raised, that's a sector that, you know, emits the maximum carbon, the returns are in high teens. So your capital is safe. The Indian government again has done a fantastic job. In the past, you know, you would hear things like the distribution companies owe money to developers. That is now past, you know, the Indian government has modified those norms wherein, suppose if a DISCOM doesn't pay you money, they lose their license to buy electricity from an exchange, and nobody wants to lose that license. Lastly, there's an interlocking mechanism in terms of how the consolidated fund of India could be tapped into to make payments to the developer. And hence, you know, investments are becoming safe. The who's who across the world from an investor perspective is in India, and that should give us the confidence that hitting the targets that we have set for ourselves should well happen. On the other hand, the constraints are some physical constraints in terms of how fast can we expand our grid network. So today, to build a renewable energy plant, we could do a hybrid plant in say 18 months, but it takes more than 30 months to build a transmission line. But the Indian government again is thinking very smart. So India is one of the largest single grids in the world. And in that, during the non-renewable hours, India is now coming up with massive battery storage capacity in the non-renewable hours. When I use the word massive, every week, India is tendering close to 1,000 to 2,000 megawatt hours of battery storage. So that's the next phase of growth is what we would see. I'll pause here.
Deepesh, no, that's very insightful, and also to take us through the entire rooftop mechanism, which definitely, and you talked about 30 lakh number, which itself is an inspiration. With that, and definitely, you know, it will require a lot of capital to come in. So my next question to Anjali, you know, it would be, what do you see the role of climate financing going forward? And if you can also touch upon what Deepesh also mentioned about empowering industries, and even Amit mentioned, you know, in terms of having green power. So can you also mention a little bit more about also decarbonization efforts?
Sure. Let me start with decarbonization across industry, and I think we have a very good sort of cross-section here, Amit, with built environment. 80% of India is yet to be built. The bulk of Indian growth is yet to happen as we go from a $3.5–4 trillion economy to a $10 trillion economy. So with so much growth ahead of us, we in some ways have the fortunate situation that we don't need to do as much remediation as better build. And now to do better build will require, as we earlier spoke, new solutions. So, you know, green cement, we keep talking about whether it's green cement or green energy or green steel. What does it really mean? It means lower emission material. Lower emission material, lower emission processes in a way, so that's kind of the mitigation element of climate, where you are mitigating for emission. There is carbon capture where you're putting carbon back. But at the same time, for our country and a lot of the global south countries, developing countries, we also need adaptation. We have to equip our current existing industry, both large and medium size, as well as agriculture, food systems. So industrial systems and food systems to adapt and transition to a lower carbon pathway. So that's adaptation. And the third piece, which again is super important for us, is resilience. We have one of the most vulnerable populations in the world, large population, young, but massively at risk because of extreme weather events for both life and livelihood. Bad air quality, you have unseasonal rain, crops get destroyed. When crops get destroyed, you don't have food, food prices go up, there's inflation, but also farmers don't have income. So if you put all of this together, there is a large amount of capital required for mitigation, but also for adaptation and resilience. A lot of the capital flows we are seeing today, bulk of it actually goes today into energy. Now, green energy is a very good example of how we need to have all other sectors develop and very fast. So if you look across the board, energy transition, sustainable food systems, supply chain, mobility, materials, what we have seen with energy in the last 15 years, today renewable is not a green choice. It's actually the most sensible commercial choice. So cost curves have to shift down, both through innovation as well as through scaling. So actually today, a new unit of green or solar is actually cheaper than a new unit of thermal. So in every boardroom, and I'll speak a little bit about industrial decarbonization, in every boardroom today, and I sit on the boards of Tata Power, Nestle, Maruti, and so on, energy discussions are around renewable because they make a lot more sense commercially. Similarly, we have to get to commercializable, scalable, cost-effective, at least cost parity. Nobody's going to pay more for a green technology. So it has to be at least cost parity, if not lower, on all elements. Again, material, supply chain, plastic, waste management, air solutions, and energy. So companies are taking up, I think, more and more in India. I think India, in some ways, we continue to innovate on this front. Along with large-scale digitization, our regulator has put in BRSR, which I think is a good start. It can be made simpler. And I know next session, hopefully, we will have someone from our regulator with us as well, to simplify it and make it much more measurable. I think we have to go past ESG. ESG is an old framework. It was useful to create a measure of, or at least a framework for responsible corporate behavior. Today, we have to be able to do very, very objective, quantifiable metrics. I think governance is a given when we think social, but certainly for environment, we have to think about water. And this was mentioned, net zero is energy, water, and waste. All of it has to be taken into account. Companies are creating sustainability committees at the board level. Just as we saw in fintech and consumer tech and consumer internet and digitization, the coming together of startup ecosystem and industrial. So adoption at scale in these spaces, so many of these are industrial technologies. So adoption at scale will only happen in large companies. I'll give you 3 examples here. We spoke about food, new way of growing food. We have a company called Iki Foods that is growing tomatoes at 10 rupees a kilo net cost. In Kota in Rajasthan, 50 degrees Celsius ambient temperature, they are able to maintain environment at 27-30 degrees, 80% less water usage, 4 times yield per acre. That's the future of food production. And it is soilless, so you're not taking away agricultural land from the farmer, you're actually creating net additional capacity. You have companies we have a company called Kazam, which, in electric mobility, there is a need to sweat the charging infrastructure better. So creating interoperability. Again, India leads the world in digitization. So interoperability for charging, better utilization. And finally, of course, we have to see what is coming through in some of our most innovative, IISc, IIT Madras, IIT Delhi, so much new materials coming out that can potentially replace plastic. I think all of that needs to be supported. There are many estimates. The Niti Aayog is doing some work on putting together kind of the definitive climate financing requirement for India. As of now, I've seen numbers that range anywhere from 100 billion to 1 trillion. So basically the number is large. It is not going to be all available domestically. We have to put domestic capital against it, but we also have to create the international capital pathways to bring more capital into India. I'll pause there.
Yes. Thanks, Anjali. And that gives a lot of hope, both from a domestic and from an international capital. And you also touched upon very interesting startups and in terms of the innovation, in terms of the water usage, what they're doing. Really nice to know that. I will ask the next question to Amit. And Amit, so similarly, you initially talked about what, from your organization point of view, what steps you're taking. So can you also touch about from a consumer point of view, right? And I see that you have also developed a carbon calculator, right? So how is that really, what was the thought process behind that, and what the consumer is really thinking about it? And all the green initiatives which you're taking as an industry, what kind of benefits are you seeing there?
It's a tricky question for me to answer, but let me try. Um, we talked about a lot of sustainability related initiatives that we run from a net zero perspective. There is a cost to it. Our cost of construction goes up by as much as 2%. It may seem small, but when you run a business which has thin margins and it's a cyclical business, every percentage matters. So our costs go up. The customers don't pay for it. In the West, especially in the consumer goods sector, FMCG, you'll find, like a very talked about example is Patagonia. If you buy a Patagonia jacket versus another jacket, there is a 15-20% premium that Patagonia gets, and that justifies the higher input costs that go into making of a jacket that is more sustainable. It's very difficult for us to sell a home which says that this is more sustainable, and it is in many ways, because we put more capex to make the home more energy efficient, and the benefit accrues for the consumer who's made the capex, the purchase decision, and the benefit happens over the next 10, 20, 30 years in the form of reduced electricity bill, air conditioning bills and all. They don't factor that in their purchase decision, right? They don't say that since I'm going to save more electricity over the 30-year period, I'll pay you more. And I'll give you an example in Hindi. One of our broker was trying to sell one of our net zero project, and so the customer said, "Ye net zero kya hota hai?" So broker said, "Sir, आप चिंता मत कीजिए, आप वहाँ पे जाएंगे ना, सब कुछ ग्रीन दिखेगा, और अब आप जो एयर ब्रीथ करेंगे ना, वो साफ सुथरी अच्छी एयर होगी, वो दिल्ली तरह की नहीं होगी." तो so that's what the net zero green initiative is captured in terms of the selling proposition. So the customers don't pay, your cost go up. So it's very difficult for us to make do with it. But we have a strong brand. We are able to get the right pricing, etc. And especially in a boom time, I think we can justify some of this investment. So we have to work towards doing a lot of awareness building about why this matters and why a customer should care about a sustainable home. And that's why we started the carbon calculator. I work for Mahindra. Mahindra's primary business is to make SUVs. At my group executive board, not many people knew that what is the amount of emission a car generates in its life cycle. Literally, Anirban and I worked together to actually define that. It's a large number, right? And what kind of sequestration is done by one tree in its lifetime? That is also not known very well. So you have to actually educate everybody that if you sell one car, you need so many trees to actually neutralize the carbon emission. So carbon calculator was a step in that direction. As Anjali touched upon, the built environment is 35-40% of the emission during construction as well as the usage phase. India, 75%, 80% of India is yet to be built. So there's a lot of emissions are going to come up. So how do you actually help customers choose the right home for them over a long period of time? So we decided to launch this carbon calculator, and we said we will give one home free. We gave one home free for one of our recent, and it's in crores, the value of one home. I said whoever has the lowest carbon footprint. And we did that earlier this year. We gave away that home. But we had to go through a very formal process, audit, etc., to make sure the person, what he's saying versus what he's doing, that's calibrated, measured. But it did a very interesting thing. Many of the people who are buying homes got aware of what is my carbon footprint? If I travel from Delhi to Mumbai, how many tons of CO2? Now in the air ticket, you see how many tons of CO2 you generate in that, in airline. Similarly, our daily habits. we generated a significant amount of carbon. So that carbon calculator was to build awareness in our customers and hopefully make them aware that a sustainable home, a net zero home is the right thing for them for the long term. So that was the reason behind it.
Thanks, Amit. And the point which you're doing for the net zero awareness, and you're not just educating the customer, I guess you're also giving by example, and the example which you give, so that they're working towards getting a very low carbon footprint. So that's very interesting, and I guess all of us are pretty much in the same fraternity. So it's very good to know that, to have this net zero awareness among the mass public as well. With this, Vineet, we have talked about innovation, we have talked about technology and the startups, right? Now, when you are making these decisions, right, what do you look at in terms of startups, right? How do you make that decision, where to invest in? And also, maybe, what advice will you give if there are any entrepreneurs or founders here? What advice will you give for early stage founders? Building in this space, yeah.
Any space. I think to any founder who wants to start, there are three things that any investor looks for. So the first thing is the entrepreneur's choice of space that they are looking at. So let's assume for you look at big problems. One of the interesting ways that you can help India become both a Viksit Bharat plus a sustainable or equitable Bharat. There's something called Sustainable Development Goals, which is just 6 years away. An imagination of a world without hunger, without poverty, without inequity. Now, how do you contribute to that? And one way to look at it is look at a problem around you, which is a real problem and not a make-believe problem. We can create a lot of make-believe problems and probably make more money in the make-believe ones than the real ones. Try to incorporate the idea of impact or making a difference into your business model. Because you are trying to solve a real-time problem, the chances of that problem being very large and therefore very scalable is there. And then you might have to look at technology to use or to leapfrog the challenges that come in an obvious manner and scale them up. So when we look at entrepreneurs, we first look at the team. So who are the people? Also depends on when you enter. So if you are entering at a very seed stage, you're basically basing your entire judgment on the entrepreneur's ability to articulate the problem and then defend. Ultimately, it's actually a bet, and instincts play a much higher role. But as the companies evolve, your equation changes. So Aavishkaar does both. We catch hold of people walking on the street and give them money. I have done that not once, not twice, at least 30, 40 times. And then I have also given money to people who have actually reached a certain stage. So early stage, a lot of people call Aavishkaar as a venture investor with a private equity approach, which is a very stupid thing to do, but we have done that. And the private equity stage, what you are trying to do is make an assessment of the performance and going much deeper into how you are transitioning your claims into a real business model. And especially even at an early growth stage, revenue has to be formed. We call it contribution margins 1, 2, 3. Those need to be fairly clearly visible. And at least an emerging bottom line. If not an emerging bottom line, at least a fairly clear statement of unit economics. So, these are all classical investing jargons, but very simply put, you should know that when you sell a product, the price of the product to the customer should be less than the cost at which you produce it. Unfortunately, very smart people do not understand this. And therefore, you create unicorns which are their valuation beauty, but from a value perspective, they are value destroyers. So I think, of course, capturing a very large market is a very important part of it, but capturing a very large market without knowing how to be profitable at the end of it is a very dangerous proposition. So avoid that.
That's very insightful, Vineet. And we have all witnessed, the way kind of capital markets, and particularly in this sector as well, several young EPC companies or manufacturing companies have gone to the markets, and this, your insights will be very helpful for young startups. Deepesh, I will ask you the next question. In the earlier round, you mentioned in terms of what are the areas you're seeing, and that was, kind of growth which you're seeing. How do you see, because you're doing execution, on-ground execution day to day, right? So would be very interesting to know from your end, what challenges are you facing and how do you see the landscape by say for next 4-5 years?
I think, from a renewable energy point of view, as I mentioned earlier, that the Indian government target was or is 500 gigawatts by 2030. There was a recent study commissioned by the government, and I think McKinsey did that study, and they came up with a 475 number, pretty close to 500. Our own estimate is anywhere between 350 to 375, which is great news. The challenges that this sector faces is largely to do with the infrastructure that's available on the ground on land and connectivity. That's very specific to the sector. But the government is again trying its best, to solve these issues. Yesterday you saw, or I think day before, there was this industry event in Rajasthan, where the Rajasthan government, which is India's largest state, has opened up extra land available and is committing and promising resources. When I mentioned earlier that we've invested in a large manufacturing facility in Tamil Nadu. Yeah, so the total capital incentive that we received was 31%. So the Indian government is doing its bit. In terms of technologies, we feel pretty upbeat about pumped hydro. I think that's another green technology that will see prominent use as we green the grid. In terms of hydrogen, I think what you mentioned, that the cost of hydrogen today is prohibitively expensive. It's 6 times the cost of electricity through hydrogen and any derivative of hydrogen. But the Indian green hydrogen story, I think, will be played more for the overseas markets. There was a chart in which General Saab showed Singapore as the largest consumer per capita of CO2. Now, if you look at Singapore, it has a population of 11 to 12 million people. It has a grid of around 11 gigawatt, all based on gas-based power plants. They don't have enough land for solar. They don't have a wind profile. Even for water, they desal water, and they get some from Malaysia. They tried getting hydroelectricity. They got 120 megawatts from Cambodia. There was an idea to get green electricity all the way from Australia through a subsea cable. Super expensive ideas. But now they've understood that for Singapore to go green by using its own infrastructure that they have currently is to import green hydrogen or green ammonia and burn it in the same equipment which they have, which is the boilers and the turbines that they have. Now, India, at the right side of the coast, Orissa, for example, Andhra Pradesh, for example, Tamil Nadu as well, we come up with policies to produce green hydrogen. Those markets can afford it. And the other technology which we think India should probably accelerate is on the smart or the small modular reactor. Again, Captain Saab mentioned about 50, 100 megawatts. I think the size is in the range of 300 megawatts. The industry is still waiting. The moment the Indian government makes announcements in terms of liability laws and so on. So you have an array of technologies available. Costs are coming down. Today, to repeat what Anjali mentioned, going green is a cost-effective idea. In addition to all the moral benefits of going green, it is inexpensive for you to go green. I'll have a chat, outside the forum with Amit as to how we can play a role to reduce the cost of electricity. So next time when you have a buyer who goes to a net zero carbon home, they should also see that the net zero home is actually, inexpensive as compared to the conventional build-up.
Thanks, Deepesh. That's very helpful, and the examples which you have given across various regions. And to add that, I also operate in India and Southeast Asia, and in terms of various countries, what we see and what, sir, which you mentioned about getting power from Khavda to Delhi, right? And I can say that what India is way ahead in terms of the power and in the network which we are having. And similarly, in a lot of countries, maybe they can't really wheel power from one location to another location. So India has that advantage. And I'm sure with this kind of, the kind of initiatives which we all, currently mentioned, we have come towards the end of the session. And I will say, just as a concluding remarks, what we discussed today in terms of what incentives, what we require, or in terms of climate financing, and if we get the entire investments and collaboration with the innovation side together, India is very well poised for a green growth. Along with economic growth, having an environment sustainability is what required. With this, I will open the floor for any question and answers if you have. Yeah, sir, please.
Good evening. I am Brigadier Chima, and I've been in the army for about 37 years, and I'm in part of academia now for the last 10 years. And I come from Universal AI University, which is the first AI university of India. And we started with the Green Campus 15 years back. We are the one who are having SDGs. Every faculty member, every student has to be a SDG ambassador and a champion. And we are also, as an education institute, publishing our ESG report, which is not mandatory for us. We are amongst the 3 institutes in India who are doing that. 10% of our curriculum is based on sustainability, both for UG and PG. Our research is 100% on sustainability. We are practicing sustainability as an institute, and every student has to go and work in the social area. I head the Center for Social, Sustainable and Spiritual Development as part of the university. We are doing a lot of into our green metrics and green ranking in the world. We are participating in that. One thing what we are looking forward, that my question and request to the industry is, that we are looking forward to more of green skills and green jobs. We need that help from the industry. What kind of a green skills you require in the industry, so that we can create those green leaders of tomorrow, create a curriculum in our university and provide those green leaders to the university, to the industry, so that they can take it forward. So that is, there has to be some fusion between the industry and the academia to create and take the sustainability forward. Thank you.
Yeah, please.
If I may answer that question, sir, thank you very much.
Deepesh, if I may, Sachin, I
Yes,
have to step
Anjali.
off. So I just wanted to thank everyone. It's been a wonderful discussion. Thank you to everybody who's there in the room, and to Sachin and my fellow panelists.
Thank you, Anjali.
Thanks, Anjali. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'll be very brief. So again, back to the Indian government, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, that is responsible to administer the PM Surya Ghar Yojana. They have a budget of 600 crores only for training. And they have been looking for partners on imparting training on basic electrical and rooftop installation. So what we are doing is that we have partnered with them to train a few thousand diploma holders. And that's one area where universities like yours can work with the government and the industry. We are also making a commitment on the kind of jobs that will be available post the training. And again, to just add quickly, we're also launching a Tata Power designed diploma program on renewable energy, which will be launched in 8 universities in India as a first pilot. It's a 3-year course. And the end purpose of all of this is to make sure that there is employment at the end of the training. We can talk offline, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you, sir. Sorry, we are running.
One question. So sorry, I'll be very brief. It is rather a question, it is a suggestion to Vineet and Anjali that I mean, I appreciate that you are funding different ideas where the ideas are sustainable or eco-friendly. And I also agree with Anjali that there has to be a work to be done in material selection as well as agriculture. And while selecting the material, the life cycle analysis, most of the times we don't realize. And we talk about plastic is very bad, and the alternatives like glass or aluminum or paper or cotton or polylactic acid are eco-friendly or environmental friendly. I mean, how many people really know that all these alternatives are guzzlers of land, electricity, energy, water, everything. So we can talk offline, but the LCA should be the parameter of selecting the right materials which will sustain the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would like to thank our speakers for the thought-provoking deliberations. Now I would like to invite Mr. Sandeep Khosla, Director General, Bombay Chamber, to present the mementos to our speakers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sachin.
I request our moderator and the panelists to stay back for a group photograph.